The moment Cale Vance's fist connected with Grant Caldwell's jaw, everyone in Red Hollow knew someone was about to die. In a town where the mine owner's word was law and survival meant keeping your head down, standing up for a saloon girl with nothing but debts to her name wasn't just foolish, it was suicide. But Lila Hart had stopped believing in heroes long ago. And the quiet drifter who'd just shattered that belief? He was about to shatter everything else too. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The sun didn't just shine on Red Hollow, it punished it. Day after day, week after week, the same relentless heat beat down on the wooden buildings and dirt streets until everything looked bleached, exhausted, ready to give up. The kind of town where hope came to die, where dreams dried up faster than the creek beds in summer, and where people learned real quick that keeping quiet kept you breathing. Lila Hart had learned that lesson early. She'd been working at the Dusty Rose Saloon for 3 years now, ever since her father had drunk himself into an early grave and left her with nothing but his debts. The kind of debts that didn't disappear when you buried someone. The kind that transferred, that grew, that became chains around your ankles whether you asked for them or not. 23 years old, and she already felt ancient. Her hands were rough from carrying trays and scrubbing tables. Her face had lost whatever softness it might have had back when she still believed things could get better. She kept her dark hair pulled back tight, kept her eyes down, kept her mouth shut except when absolutely necessary. That was the trick to surviving in Red Hollow. Be invisible. Be nothing. Be so unremarkable that men like Silas Caldwell forgot you existed long enough for you to make it through another day. Silas owned the mine, which meant he owned the town, which meant he owned everyone in it, whether they wanted to admit it or not. His word was law, his men were judge and jury, and his son Grant was the crown prince of this dusty little kingdom, spoiled, mean, and convinced the world owed him everything he wanted. Lila had been dodging Grant's attention for months now. It wasn't easy. He'd decided she was something he wanted to possess, like a new horse or a fancy rifle, and Grant Caldwell wasn't used to not getting what he wanted. You just gotta be smart about it, her friend Mary had told her one night, both of them sitting on the back steps of the saloon after closing. Mary was older, harder, had been working there longer. Give him enough attention that he don't get angry, but not so much that he thinks you're interested. It's a balance. I'm tired of balancing, Lila had said quietly. Yeah, well, get tired enough and you'll fall. And falling in this town means landing in the dirt with no way back up. Mary had been right, of course. She usually was. So Lila kept balancing, kept dodging, kept pretending she didn't notice the way Grant looked at her like she was property he hadn't acquired yet. The Dusty Rose wasn't much to look at. Weathered wood, warped floorboards, a bar that had seen better days about 20 years ago. But it was the only real gathering place in Red Hollow, which meant it stayed busy. Miners came in after their shifts, covered in dust and desperate for whiskey. Cowboys passing through stopped for a night. Occasionally, some traveling salesman would set up in the corner, trying to peddle whatever he thought these people might buy. Lila had seen it all, had heard every sad story, every big dream, every excuse for why men drank until they couldn't stand. She'd learned to smile without meaning it, to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, to exist in the background of other people's lives without ever really being seen. Until the day Cale Vance walked in. It was a Tuesday. She remembered because Tuesdays were usually slow, which meant she might actually get to sit down for 5 minutes. The afternoon sun was slanting through the windows at that angle that made everything look gold and hazy, dust motes floating in the air like tiny stars. She was wiping down a table near the door when it opened. Didn't even look up at first. Someone was always coming or going, but something made her glance over. Maybe the way the light changed. Maybe the sudden quiet that fell over the room. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe 5'10" or 11, but he carried himself like someone who'd learned to move through the world carefully. Dark hair, longer than was fashionable, pulled back from a face that looked like it had seen its share of trouble. Maybe 30, maybe older. Hard to tell. He had those kind of eyes that seemed both young and old at the same time, like they'd seen too much too soon. He wore trail clothes, dusty, worn, practical. Not poor, but not trying to impress anyone either. A gun on his hip, but worn like a tool, not a statement. Everything about him said he was just passing through. He found a table in the corner, sat with his back to the wall. Old habit, probably. Lila had seen enough drifters to recognize the type. "What can I get you?" she asked, walking over. He looked up at her, and something in his expression caught her off guard. Not the usual assessment she got from men. The looking, the evaluating, the deciding whether she was worth pursuing. Just attention, like he was actually seeing her as a person instead of a thing. "Water," he said. His voice was quiet, a little rough. "And whatever food you've got that's hot." "Got stew. Might be more potato than meat, but it's edible." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "That'll do." She brought him water, brought him stew, brought him bread that was only slightly stale. He nodded his thanks each time, but didn't try to start a conversation. Lila appreciated that. Most men who came through either tried to chat her up or ignored her completely. This one seemed content to just exist in his own space. She was clearing tables on the other side of the room when Marcus Webb stumbled in, already half drunk, though it wasn't even dinner time yet. Marcus worked at the mine, had been there 15 years, and had a mean streak that got meaner the more he drank. "Lila!" he shouted across the room. "Bring me whiskey, girl, and don't water it down this time." She'd learned not to argue with drunks. Just nod, pour, collect money, move on. She brought him his whiskey. He grabbed her wrist when she set it down. "You know what your problem is?" "Here we go," she thought. "No, Marcus. What's my problem?" "You think you're better than the rest of us, walking around with that look on your face like you're too good for this place." His grip was tight enough to hurt. She didn't pull away. That would just make it worse. "I don't think that, Marcus. Now let go. Make me." It happened so fast she almost missed it. 1 second Marcus had her wrist. The next second he was jerked backward out of his chair, his drink spilling across the table, and the quiet stranger from the corner had him by the collar. "She asked you to let go," Kyle said. Kyle, still quiet, still calm, but there was something in his voice that made Marcus go very still. "This ain't your business, Drifter. It is now." The whole saloon had gone silent. Lila's heart was pounding. This was bad. This was the kind of thing that got people hurt. "Marcus," she said quickly, "just leave it. Go sleep it off." But Marcus was too drunk and too stupid to read the room. He swung at Kyle, a wild haymaker that had no chance of landing. Kale moved like water, stepping aside and letting Marcus's momentum carry him face first into the table. Marcus came up bleeding from his nose, rage overtaking whatever sense he had left. He reached for the knife on his belt. That's when Kale hit him. One punch, fast and precise, right on the jaw. Marcus dropped like a sack of grain. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the door opened and Grant Caldwell walked in with 2 of his father's men flanking him. Of course this would be the moment. Grant took in the scene, Marcus on the floor, the stranger standing over him, Lila frozen in place. His eyes narrowed. "Seems we got ourselves a problem," Grant said slowly. Cale turned to face him. "No problem. Just a drunk who didn't know when to stop. That drunk works for my father, which makes what happens to him my business. He put hands on the lady. That's where it became my business." Grant's jaw tightened. Lila could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He wasn't as drunk or as stupid as Marcus, which made him more dangerous. He was trying to decide whether this was worth pushing. "Lady?" Grant let out a short, cruel laugh. "That's a generous word for a saloon girl working off her daddy's debts." Something flickered in Cale's expression. Something cold. "She asked him to let go. That's all that matters." "You new here, so maybe you don't understand how things work," Grant said, taking a step closer. "My father owns the mine. The mine owns this town, which means what we say goes. And I say Marcus was just having a little fun. No harm meant." "He hurt her." "She's fine." Grant waved a dismissive hand. "Lila's tougher than she looks. Ain't that right, Lila?" She wanted to disappear, wanted to sink through the floorboards. Every eye in the saloon was on her, waiting to see what she'd say. If she agreed with Grant, she'd be safe. If she didn't, "I'm fine," she heard herself say, hating herself for it. "It's fine." Cale looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her throat tight. Not judgment, just understanding. He knew exactly what she was doing and why. There. See? Grant smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everything's fine. So why don't you finish your meal and move along before this becomes a real problem? For a long moment, Kyle didn't move. Lila held her breath. Then, slowly, he turned and walked back to his table, picked up his hat, left money on the table, more than the meal cost. He walked past Grant without a word, past the men at the door, and out into the brutal afternoon sun. Grant watched him go, then turned to Lila. You see what happens when you encourage strangers? They get ideas. They think they can just walk in here and change how things work. I didn't encourage anything. No? He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Because from where I'm standing, it looked like you were real grateful for his attention. I was working, Grant, same as always. You remember what we talked about? About you and me? How could she forget? He'd cornered her 2 weeks ago, laid out his proposal like it was a business transaction. Marry him, let him pay off her debts, become Mrs. Grant Caldwell. In exchange, she'd be respectable, protected, safe. She told him she needed time to think about it. Really, she just needed him to leave her alone long enough to figure out an escape plan that didn't exist. I remember. Good. Because my patience isn't infinite, Lila. My father's been pushing me to settle down, and I've been patient with you, real patient, but there are limits. He let that hang in the air between them, then turned to his men. Get Marcus out of here. Let him sleep it off. They dragged the still unconscious Marcus out. The other patrons slowly went back to their drinks, their conversations, pretending nothing had happened. That was how it worked in Red Hollow. You saw things, you ignored things, you moved on. Lila went back to clearing tables, her hands shaking slightly. She told herself it was just adrenaline, just the aftermath of confrontation. Had nothing to do with the way that stranger had looked at Marcus, then at her, like she actually mattered. Mary caught up with her in the back. You all right? Yeah. That was stupid of him. Which him? The drifter. Noble maybe, but stupid. Grant's going to remember that. He'll forget. Some other drama will come along. But Mary was giving her a look. You sure about that? Because I saw the way Grant was looking at him. That wasn't going to forget this looking. That was making plans looking. Lila dried her hands on her apron. Not my problem. The guy was just passing through anyway. Maybe. Mary didn't sound convinced. Just be careful. You're already on Grant's radar. You don't need to give him more reasons to pay attention. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lila served drinks, dodged wandering hands, smiled until her face hurt. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of day she'd lived 100 times before. But when she finally made it back to her room above the saloon that night, she found herself standing at the window, looking out at the dark street, wondering where the stranger had gone, wondering why he'd bothered to step in when everyone else just looked away, wondering why part of her hoped she'd see him again, even though she knew better than to hope for anything in Red Hollow. 3 days passed. Lila tried not to think about Kyle Vance. She'd learned his name from Tom, the blacksmith, who'd sold him supplies. Tried not to notice the way Grant seemed to be around more often, watching her more closely. Tried not to acknowledge the small, stupid flutter in her chest when she caught herself looking toward the saloon door. Then, on Friday evening, he came back. Same corner table. Same quiet presence. This time he ordered whiskey along with his meal. Lila brought it over, trying to keep her expression neutral. Thought you'd moved on. Had some business to finish up. In Red Hollow? She couldn't keep the skepticism out of her voice. We're not exactly a bustling metropolis. That almost smile again. You'd be surprised what people need, even in small towns. She wanted to ask what he did, where he was from, why he'd bothered defending her when it wasn't his fight. Instead, she just nodded and turned to go. Thank you, he said quietly. She looked back. For what? For not making it worse the other day. You could have. Would have been within your rights. Rights don't mean much when you're trying to survive. No, he agreed. I suppose they don't. Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, maybe. Two people who understood what it meant to navigate a world that didn't care whether you lived or died, as long as you stayed quiet while doing it. Your name's Lila, he said. Not a question. And yours is Kyle. Word travels. Small town, not much else to talk about. He took a sip of his whiskey, considering. You been here long? All my life. You? Just passing through. That what you tell yourself? The words came out before she could stop them. Too familiar, too direct. But he didn't seem offended. It's what's true. I don't stay anywhere long. Must be nice, having that option. He looked at her then, really looked, and she felt pinned by those dark eyes. Is it? Before she could answer, the door banged open and a group of miners poured in, loud and thirsty. Lila was pulled back into the rhythm of work, pouring, serving, clearing, repeating. But she felt hyper-aware of Kyle's presence in the corner, the way he nursed his drink slowly, the way his eyes occasionally followed her across the room. It wasn't until near closing that Grant showed up again. He'd been drinking already, she could tell. Not falling down drunk like Marcus, but enough to make him bold and mean. He walked straight to Kyle's table and sat down without invitation. You're still here, Grant said. Appears that way. Didn't take my advice about moving along? Don't recall you giving advice. Thought it was more of a threat. Grant's smile was all teeth. See, that's where you're confused. In Red Hollow, there's no difference. Lila busied herself wiping down the bar, trying to listen without being obvious about it. The other patrons were watching too, conversations dying down. I'm not looking for trouble, Kyle said evenly. Funny, because trouble seems to find you anyway. Grant leaned back in his chair. I asked around about you. Know what I found? Nothing. No one knows where you're from, what you do, why you're here. That's suspicious. Man's got a right to his privacy. Not when he rides into my town and starts making problems. Your town. Kale's voice stayed level, but something in it had changed, gotten colder. Last I checked, you don't own the deed to every piece of land here. My father might as well. The mine is Red Hollow. Without it, this place would dry up and blow away inside a month. Every person here depends on Caldwell money for their survival, which means what we say matters. And what are you saying? Grant leaned forward. I'm saying Lila Hart is off limits. I'm saying you need to understand your place here. I'm saying that if I see you putting your hands on anyone in this town again, we're going to have a problem that doesn't end with talking. Kale's expression didn't change. Noted. Good. Grant stood up. Finish your drink and go sleep wherever it is drifters sleep. And tomorrow, maybe think about whether Red Hollow is really where you want to be. He walked over to the bar where Lila was standing, very deliberately placed his hand over hers. Walk me out? It wasn't a request. She nodded, let him guide her toward the door, felt Kyle's eyes on them the whole way. Outside, Grant pulled her around the side of the building where the shadows were thick. You need to stay away from him, he said without preamble. I'm just doing my job, Grant. He's a customer. He's a problem. And you encouraging him? I'm not encouraging anything. Makes you part of that problem. He grabbed her arm, not hard enough to really hurt, but firm enough to make his point. I've been patient with you, Lila. Real patient. But my patience has limits. You keep saying that because you keep testing it. His grip tightened slightly. I'm offering you a way out. A good life, respect, security. All you have to do is say yes. And if I say no? His eyes went cold. Then you stay right where you are, working at this saloon, paying off debts that'll probably outlive you, dodging drunks like Marcus who think they can put their hands wherever they want. Is that really what you choose? She wanted to jerk her arm free, wanted to tell him exactly what she thought of him and his proposal. But Mary's words echoed in her head. Give him enough attention that he don't get angry, but not so much that he thinks you're interested. I just need more time, she said quietly. How much time? I don't know. He studied her face in the dim light. 2 weeks. I'll give you 2 more weeks to think about it. After that, I'm going to need an answer, a real one. He let go of her arm and walked away without another word, leaving her standing in the shadows, her heart pounding. When she went back inside, Kyle was gone. Money on the table again, more than he owed. She pocketed it and tried not to think about why her hands were shaking. The next week passed in a strange tension. Kyle didn't come back to the saloon, but Lila caught glimpses of him around town. At the general store, buying supplies, talking to Tom the blacksmith. Once, she saw him riding out toward the hills at dawn, returning at dusk with whatever he'd gone searching for. He was staying at the old boarding house on the edge of town, she learned. Keeping to himself mostly, but doing odd jobs here and there. Fixing things, trading goods, the kind of work that didn't draw attention but kept a man fed. Grant, meanwhile, was everywhere. Suddenly solicitous, bringing her small gifts, a ribbon, a bar of nice soap, a book he thought she might like. Making sure everyone in town saw him courting her, staking his claim. It was suffocating. "You should just marry him," Mary said one night. They were sitting on the back steps again, the ritual that had become Lila's only real friendship in this town. "I know you don't want to hear it, but really, look at your options." "My options are marry a man I don't love or stay trapped forever?" "That's pretty much it, yeah." Lila pulled her knees up to her chest. The night was cooler than usual, a small mercy. There has to be something else. "Like what? You gonna run off with that drifter?" Mary's tone was teasing, but there was an edge to it. "Don't be ridiculous." "Is it ridiculous? Because I've seen the way you look at him. And more importantly, I've seen the way Grant's noticed you looking at him. I don't—" "Lila." Mary turned to face her fully. "I'm your friend, so I'm going to be honest. You're playing a dangerous game. Grant's not going to forget what happened with Marcus. And he's definitely not going to forget that some stranger rode into town and made him look small. You keep mooning over Cale Vance, Grant's going to make both of you pay for it." "I'm not mooning." "Then what are you doing?" Good question. What was she doing? Hoping? For what? A man she barely knew to somehow save her from a situation that couldn't be saved? "I'm just trying to get through each day," she said finally. Mary sighed. "I know, we all are. But some days are more dangerous than others, and I got a feeling the dangerous ones are coming." She wasn't wrong. 2 days later, everything changed. It was late afternoon, the saloon mostly empty, except for a few regulars nursing drinks. Lila was in the back room, counting inventory, when she heard shouting from the street. She went to the window. A crowd had gathered near the general store. More shouting. Then she saw them. Grant and 3 of his father's men, and Kyle, his face already bleeding from what looked like a recent punch. Her stomach dropped. She ran downstairs, pushed through the saloon doors just in time to see Grant shove Kyle backward. "Think you're smart?" Grant was yelling. "Think you can just come into my town and—" "I haven't done anything," Kyle said, wiping blood from his lip. "You exist. That's enough." "Grant, stop!" Lila heard herself shout before she could think better of it. Every head turned. Grant's eyes found her, and she saw the fury there. "Get back inside, Lila." "What are you doing?" "Handling a problem. Now get back inside." But she couldn't move, couldn't watch this happen and do nothing. Kyle caught her eye and gave the smallest shake of his head. "Don't," he was saying, "don't make this worse." One of Grant's men hit Kyle from behind. He went down hard, blood in the dirt. "That's enough." Sheriff Morrison finally appeared, pushing through the crowd. He was old, tired, and thoroughly in Silas Caldwell's pocket, but even he seemed to recognize this was getting out of hand. "Break it up." "He started it," Grant said immediately. "That right?" Morrison looked at Kyle. Kyle struggled to his feet, breathing hard. "No, but does it matter?" Morrison's face tightened, because everyone knew the answer. No, it didn't matter, not in Red Hollow. "You got somewhere else to be?" Morrison asked Kale quietly. "Thought this was a free country." "It is, but some places are freer than others. You understand what I'm saying?" Kale looked around at the crowd, at Grant's satisfied smirk, at Lila standing frozen on the saloon steps. Then he nodded slowly. "Yeah, I understand." "Good. Then I suggest you think real carefully about whether Red Hollow is where you want to be." Kyle walked away without another word, leaving drops of blood in the dirt behind him. The crowd dispersed slowly. Grant made sure to walk past Lila on his way back to his horse. "See what happens?" he said quietly. "See what happens when you don't listen?" Then he was gone, and Lila was left standing there, her hands shaking with anger and fear and something she didn't have a name for. That night, she couldn't sleep. Kept seeing Cale's face, the blood, the way he'd looked at her and shaken his head. Don't make this worse. Around midnight, she gave up and went downstairs. The saloon was closed, dark, quiet. She sat at the bar in the darkness and tried to figure out what to do. The knock on the back door made her jump. She almost didn't answer it, almost pretended she wasn't there. But something made her walk to the door, crack it open. Kyle stood in the alley, his face cleaned up but showing dark bruises. His eyes met hers through the gap. "I shouldn't be here," he said. "No," she agreed. "You shouldn't." But she opened the door wider anyway. He came inside and she locked the door behind him. They stood in the dark back room of the saloon, and all the words she'd been holding back suddenly wanted to spill out. "You need to leave town," she said instead. "I know. Grant's not going to let this go. I know that too." "Then why are you still here?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Honest answer?" "Please." "I don't know. Should have left days ago. Would have, if I was smart." He touched his bruised ribs gingerly. "But there's something about this place." "There's nothing about this place. It's dying and mean and it'll kill you if you let it." "Then why are you still here?" The question hit harder than she expected. "I don't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice." "Easy to say when you're free to come and go as you please." "Is it?" He stepped closer and she could see his eyes in the darkness. "You think I'm free? I've been running for 3 years, never staying anywhere long enough to matter, never letting anyone close enough to care. You call that freedom? What are you running from?" He smiled, but it was sad. "The past? Same as everyone." They stood there in the darkness, close enough that she could hear him breathing, close enough to feel the heat coming off his body, close enough that if she just moved forward a few inches— "You should go," she whispered. "Yeah." But neither of them moved. "Lila—" Whatever he was going to say was cut off by the sound of breaking glass from the front of the saloon. They both froze. More breaking glass. Laughter. Multiple voices. "Stay here," Kyle said. But she followed him to the front room. Through the windows, they could see 3 men, miners from the looks of them, throwing rocks at the saloon. "Whore!" one of them shouted. "Think you're too good for us?" Another rock crashed through a window. Kyle's hand went to where his gun would be, but he wasn't wearing it. Lila grabbed his arm. "Don't, they'll kill you." "Can't just let them?" "Yes, you can. This is my problem, not yours." More shouting from outside, more breaking glass. Then, finally, the sound of horses riding away, drunken laughter fading into the night. Lila sank into a chair, looking at the broken windows, the rocks scattered across the floor. Probably Grant's doing. A message, a reminder of who had the power here. "This can't be your life," Kyle said quietly. "It's the life I have." "It doesn't have to be." She looked up at him. "What are you suggesting? That I run away with a stranger I barely know? Live on the road, always moving, never settling? That's not life either." "No," he admitted. "I guess it's not." He helped her sweep up the broken glass in silence. When they were done, he headed for the back door. "Kyle?" He turned. "Where are you really from?" He considered the question. "Lot of places, none of them home." "And the running? What happens when you get tired of it?" "Don't know. Haven't got there yet." He left through the back door, disappearing into the shadows like he'd never been there. Lila locked up and went upstairs to her small room, lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the night sounds of Red Hollow. She had 2 weeks before Grant demanded an answer. 2 weeks to figure out whether survival was enough or if there might be something more. 2 weeks before everything fell apart in ways she couldn't possibly predict. But tonight, in the darkness, she let herself think about a man who'd stood up for her when he didn't have to, who'd looked at her like she was a person worth protecting, who was running from his past just as surely as she was trapped in hers. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself feel something besides resignation. It was small, fragile, probably foolish, but it was there. The broken windows got fixed 3 days later. Not by Lila, she couldn't afford it, but by Silas Caldwell's men. They showed up without asking, replaced the glass, swept up the remaining shards, and left without a word. The message was clear enough. Grant could break her things, and Grant could fix them. A demonstration of power wrapped up as generosity. Lila hated every second of it. She kept working, kept smiling, kept balancing on that razor's edge between compliance and resistance. But something had shifted inside her the night Kyle helped her clean up the glass. Some part of her that had been numb for 3 years was waking up, and it hurt more than staying asleep ever had. Kyle stayed in Red Hollow. Despite the beating, despite the obvious danger, he didn't leave. She'd see him in the morning sometimes, walking toward Tom's blacksmith shop or heading out with supplies on his horse. He never came back to the saloon, though, smart enough to know that would just pour oil on a fire already burning too hot. But their paths crossed anyway. Small town, limited streets. Impossible to avoid someone completely when you both existed in the same few square miles. The first time it happened, she was carrying supplies from the general store back to the saloon. Heavy bags cutting into her hands, the sun beating down, merciless as always. She rounded the corner and nearly walked straight into him. "Sorry," they both said at the same time. He took one of the bags from her without asking. She should have protested, should have told him to go, but she was tired and the bag was heavy and she just didn't. They walked in silence for half a block. Then Kyle said, "The windows look good." "Grant's men fix them." Figured. "It's a reminder," she said quietly, "that he can take care of me, protect me, if I just say yes." "Is that what you want? Does it matter what I want?" He stopped walking, turned to face her, right there on the street where anyone could see. "Yeah, it matters. To who?" "To you. Should matter to you." She almost laughed. "I stopped thinking about what I wanted a long time ago. It's easier that way." "Easier doesn't mean better." "No," she agreed, "but it means surviving." They reached the saloon. He handed her the bag, their fingers brushing for just a second. She felt that touch like electricity. "Lila, don't." She cut him off before he could finish. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. You'll be gone in a week or a month, and I'll still be here. So just don't." She went inside before he could respond. Stood behind the closed door with her heart pounding, hating herself for wanting him to follow, relieved when he didn't. Mary found her there a few minutes later. "You're playing with fire." "I'm not playing with anything." "Then what do you call that? Having a conversation in broad daylight with the man Grant already beat half to death?" "He was helping me carry—" "I don't care if he was carrying the whole damn store. You know how it looks, and you know Grant's watching." Lila set the bags down harder than necessary. "Let him watch. I'm not his property." "Not yet. But you will be in less than 2 weeks unless you figure something else out." "There's nothing else." "Then stop acting like there might be. Stop looking at that drifter like he's some kind of answer. He's not. He's just another problem you can't afford." Mary wasn't wrong. Lila knew that. But knowing something and feeling it were two different things, and what she felt when Kyle looked at her, when he spoke to her like her opinion mattered, like she was more than just a debt to be paid or a problem to be solved, that feeling was dangerous precisely because it made her want things she couldn't have. The next week crawled by. Grant came into the saloon every evening, sat at the best table, made sure everyone saw him treating Lila with exaggerated courtesy, bringing her flowers, asking about her day in a voice loud enough for the whole room to hear, playing the role of devoted suitor for an audience that knew better but pretended not to. 1 week, he reminded her on Thursday night, catching her arm as she passed. 1 more week, and I need an answer. I know. I hope it's the right one, for both our sakes. She pulled free and went back to work, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on her. They all knew what was coming. They all knew she didn't have a real choice. Some of them pitied her. Most were just glad it wasn't happening to them. On Friday evening, just after sunset, Tom the blacksmith came into the saloon looking for her. That was unusual enough that she immediately knew something was wrong. What is it? That friend of yours, Kyle. He's hurt. Her stomach dropped. What happened? Got jumped on the road coming back from the hills. 3 men. He fought 'em off, but... Tom shook his head. He's bleeding pretty bad. Won't go to Doc Miller. Says he can't afford the attention. I got him at my place, but I don't know what to do. Lila looked around the saloon. It was early yet, only a few customers. Mary caught her eye and seemed to understand immediately. Go, Mary said. I'll cover. If Grant comes, I'll tell him you're sick. Go. Lila grabbed her shawl and followed Tom out into the cooling evening. His smithy was at the far end of town, away from the main street. The furnace was banked for the night, casting the workspace in dim red light. Cale was sitting on a stool near the back, holding a bloody cloth to his side. His face was pale, jaw tight with pain. "You shouldn't have come," he said when he saw her. "Shut up." She moved closer, pulled the cloth away to look at the wound. Deep gash across his ribs, still bleeding. "What happened?" "Guess someone didn't appreciate me staying in town." "Grant's men?" "Didn't ask for introductions." Tom hovered nearby. "I gotta get home to my wife. She's expecting me for dinner. You gonna be all right here?" "We'll manage," Lila said. "Thank you, Tom." "Don't thank me. Just be careful, both of you." He left them alone in the dim workspace. Lila found water, clean rags, tried to remember everything her mother had taught her about treating wounds before she died. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Everything hurts." She cleaned the wound as gently as she could. Cale hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. The cut was deep but clean. No sign of infection yet. "You need stitches. Can you do it?" "I'm a saloon girl, not a doctor." "Best I got right now." She found thread and a needle in Tom's supplies. Her hands shook as she threaded it. "I've never done this before." First time for everything. That's not reassuring, but she did it anyway. Slow, careful stitches while Kyle gripped the edge of the stool and tried not to make noise. His skin was hot under her fingers, muscles tense. She could feel his heartbeat, fast and hard. When she finished, she wrapped the wound with clean cloth and sat back. Her hands were shaking worse now. "You can't stay in town," she said. "Probably not. Grant won't stop until you leave or you're dead." "Seems that way." "So why are you still here?" He looked at her with those dark eyes, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch. "You really don't know?" "Kyle, I should have left after that first night, should have walked away and kept going, but every time I think about riding out, I think about you stuck here, trapped, and I just—" He stopped, shook his head. "Doesn't matter. I'll be gone by morning." "Good. You should be." "Yeah." But neither of them moved. The space between them felt charged, dangerous. Lila could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. "You deserve better than Grant Caldwell," Kale said quietly. "I deserve what I get. That's how the world works." "No, that's how this town works. The world's bigger than Red Hollow." "Not for me, it isn't." He reached out slowly, like he was afraid she might bolt, and touched her cheek. Just the lightest brush of his fingers, but she felt it everywhere. "It could be," he said. She should have pulled away, should have told him to stop, should have remembered all the very good reasons why this was impossible, dangerous, stupid. Instead, she leaned into his touch. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too." "Of what?" "You're free. You can go anywhere." "Of this." His thumb traced along her jaw. "Of wanting something I can't have. Of staying when I should run. Of caring about someone who deserves a better man than a drifter with nothing to offer." Kyle, the door to the smithy creaked open. They jerked apart like they'd been burned. Lila's heart hammered as she turned to see who'd found them. It was Mary. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the last light of dusk, her face unreadable. "Grant's at the saloon looking for you," she said flatly. "Told him you were sick. He's insisting on walking you home to make sure you're all right." Lila stood up quickly. "I have to go." "Lila, wait." Cale started to stand, winced, sat back down. "Stay here tonight," she told him. "Tom won't mind. And tomorrow, please. Please just leave." She followed Mary out into the street. They walked in silence for a block before Mary spoke. "You're in love with him." It wasn't a question. Lila didn't answer. "You know what Grant will do if he finds out?" "Nothing's happened." "Doesn't matter. The wanting is enough." Mary stopped walking, grabbed Lila's arm. "Listen to me. I know you think this is different, that maybe this time, maybe this man, maybe something good could actually happen, but it can't. Not here. Not like this. You marry Grant, you survive. You run off with Kyle, you both die. Maybe not today, Maybe not tomorrow, but Grant will hunt you down and make an example. That's who he is. So I should just give up? Accept it? Yes. Mary's voice was hard. Because that's reality. That's the choice. And pretending there's another option will just get you killed. They reached the saloon. Grant was waiting outside, leaning against the wall with studied casualness. There you are, he said, straightening up. Mary said you were feeling poorly. Just needed some air. His eyes narrowed slightly. Your face is flushed. It's hot out. He stepped closer, studying her, looking for something, evidence, guilt. She forced herself to stay still, to meet his gaze. Come on, he said finally. I'll walk you up. I'm fine, really. I insist. It wasn't a request. She let him guide her inside, up the stairs to her door. He stood too close in the narrow hallway. 6 days, he said softly. I know. My father's starting to ask questions about when we're making an announcement. Grant, I've been patient, Lila, more patient than anyone else would be, but patience runs out. His hand came up to her hair, twisted a loose strand around his finger. You understand that, don't you? Yes. Good. He leaned in like he might kiss her. She held her breath. At the last second, he just brushed his lips against her forehead. Get some rest. You look tired. He left her standing there, shaking. She went into her room, locked the door, and sank onto the bed. 6 days until she had to give Grant an answer. 6 days until she became Mrs. Grant Caldwell, and whatever small hope she'd been carrying died completely. Unless she did something impossible. Unless she ran. The thought kept her awake all night. Running meant leaving everything. Mary. The few people in town who'd been kind. The grave where her parents were buried. It meant stepping into the unknown with a man she barely knew, trusting that whatever he was running from wouldn't destroy them both. But staying meant what? A lifetime of Grant's hands on her, his voice in her ear, his control over every aspect of her existence. Children, probably, raised to be just like him. Years and years of slow suffocation disguised as security. By the time dawn broke, she still hadn't decided. Still balanced on that edge between the life she knew and the one she could only imagine. She went downstairs to start preparing the saloon for the day. Found Mary already there, sweeping. Didn't sleep either? Lila asked. Kept thinking about you doing something stupid. Like what? Mary stopped sweeping, looked at her. Like running off with a drifter and thinking it'll end anywhere but bad. I haven't decided anything. But you're thinking about it. Lila didn't answer, didn't need to. Mary could read her well enough. You asked me once if I ever thought about leaving, Mary said quietly. Remember? Yeah. I was 23, same age you are now. There was a man, a gambler passing through. He had these eyes that made you think maybe the world was bigger than it seemed. Maybe there was more out there than this dying town and men who thought they owned you. Lila set down the glasses she'd been organizing. What happened? I ran. Made it about 50 miles before Grant's father, Silas was young then, mean as a snake, caught up with us. Beat that gambler so bad he never walked right again. Brought me back, made sure everyone knew what happened to girls who got ideas above their station. Mary, I'm telling you this because I want you to understand. These men, the Caldwells, they don't let go of what they think belongs to them. Grant's worse than his father ever was because he's got something to prove. You run, he'll come after you. And when he catches you, and he will catch you, it'll be worse than anything you can imagine. So I should just marry him? Live that life? You should survive, however you can. Mary started sweeping again. But if you do run, if you're that determined to throw your life away on a maybe, at least make sure it's worth it. Make sure he's worth it. The morning passed slowly. Lila went through the motions, serving the few early customers, cleaning, preparing. Her mind kept drifting to the smithy, wondering if Kyle was still there, if he'd taken her advice and left, if she'd ever see him again. Around noon, she got her answer. She was wiping down tables when the door opened and Kyle walked in. He moved carefully, favoring his injured side, but he was on his feet. The saloon went quiet. Every eye turned to watch. He walked straight to Lila. Can we talk? Now's not a good time. It's important. She could feel everyone watching. Could already imagine the stories spreading through town. Lila Hart and that drifter meeting in broad daylight. Grant would hear about it within the hour. Outside, she said. Back alley. She followed him out, her heart pounding. The alley was narrow, shaded, private. What are you doing? She demanded. I told you to leave. I tried, made it about 10 miles before I turned around. Why? He looked at her, and she saw all the struggle in his eyes. The war between staying and going, between wanting and wisdom. Because I can't leave you here. Because every time I close my eyes, I see you trapped in this place, slowly dying, and I can't... He stopped, collected himself. Come with me. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? Leave. Tonight. We'll ride north, find somewhere Grant can't reach. Start over. You're insane. Probably. He'll hunt us down. Maybe, but maybe not. The world's bigger than his reach. You don't know that. No, he admitted. But I know what happens if you stay. Is that really better? She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that safety, even bought with surrender, was worth it. But standing there in the alley, looking at this man who'd turned back, who'd risked everything to ask her to run, she couldn't make herself believe it. I don't even know you, she said weakly. You know enough. You know I see you. You know I won't hurt you. You know that when I look at you, I see a person worth fighting for. He stepped closer. That's more than Grant will ever give you. And what are you offering? A life on the run, never settling, always looking over our shoulders? Freedom, choice, a chance to figure out who you are when you're not trapped. His hand found hers. I'm not promising it'll be easy, but I'm promising it'll be real. She looked down at their joined hands, thought about Mary's story, about the gambler who'd been beaten until he couldn't walk, about the consequences of running. But she also thought about 6 more days until her life ended, until she became a different person, a lesser person, a person who'd given up. I need time to think. You have until midnight. That's when I'm leaving, with or without you. Midnight, that's 10 hours. I know, but Grant's closing in and I can feel it. We go tonight or we don't go at all. He left her there in the alley, trembling. 10 hours to make a decision that would define the rest of her life. She went back inside. Mary took one look at her face and knew. He asked you to run. Lila nodded. And you're actually considering it. I don't know, maybe, yes. Mary closed her eyes. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe, but at least I'll have chosen it. The afternoon stretched into evening. Lila served drinks, cleared tables, smiled at customers, all while her mind spun in circles. Run, stay, live, die, freedom, safety, all the impossible choices that had no good answer. Grant came in at his usual time, sat at his usual table, watched her with those cold eyes that promised possession. 5 days now, he said when she brought his whiskey. I can count. He caught her wrist, not hard, but firm. You seem distracted tonight. Just tired. The drifter's still in town, did you know that? Her heart stopped. I haven't seen him. No, funny. Because Tom mentioned you patched him up last night, after he got jumped on the road. Grant's grip tightened. You want to tell me about that? He was hurt. I helped, that's all. That better be all. He pulled her closer, lowered his voice. Because if I find out you've been doing more than helping, if I find out you've been giving him ideas, giving yourself ideas, well, let's just say that wouldn't end well for anyone. He let go. She stepped back, rubbing her wrist. 5 days, Lila, then this ends. One way or another. She finished her shift in a daze. When closing time came, Mary pulled her aside. You're really going to do it, aren't you? Lila didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, if I stay, I die slowly. If I run, I might die fast, but at least I'll have tried. And if he's not what you think, if he turns out to be just another man who wants to own you, then I'll run from him too. Mary's eyes filled with tears. I'm going to miss you. I haven't decided. Yes, you have. I can see it. Mary pulled her into a hug. Be smart. Be careful. And if you get a chance, don't look back. Lila went upstairs to her room, looked around at the few possessions she'd accumulated. None of it mattered. None of it was worth staying for. She packed light. One bag with a change of clothes, what little money she'd saved, her mother's locket. That was it. That was everything she owned that meant anything. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. Each minute felt like an hour. Each hour felt like a lifetime. At 11:30, she heard sounds from downstairs. Voices. Then footsteps on the stairs. Multiple people. Her door burst open. Grant stood there with two of his men, his face twisted with rage. "Going somewhere?" he asked, looking at her packed bag. Her stomach dropped. "Grant, don't!" He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think Tom wouldn't tell me what he saw? You and that drifter in the smithy, touching, talking, planning. Nothing happened. I don't care if nothing happened. You were going to run." He shook her. "You were going to leave me, embarrass me, make me look like a fool. Let go." He hit her, open palm across the face, hard enough to snap her head sideways. She tasted blood. "You're mine," he said, voice low and dangerous. "I've been patient. I've been kind. And this is how you repay me? I'm not yours. I never was." He hit her again. This time she fell, her bag spilling across the floor. "Boss," one of the men said nervously, "maybe we should—" "Shut up." Grant hauled Lila back to her feet. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to have a wedding. Tomorrow. No more waiting. And your drifter friend? He's going to watch. Then he's going to leave Red Hollow, and if he ever comes back, I'll kill him myself." "No." "Yes." He dragged her toward the door. "And after the wedding, you're going to spend the rest of your life remembering what happens when you try to leave me." They were halfway down the stairs when the saloon doors burst open. Cale stood there, gun in hand, blood seeping through the bandage on his side. "Let her go," he said. Grant laughed. "Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of witnesses? You'll hang before sunrise." "Maybe, but you'll still be dead." The moment stretched out, taut as wire. Everyone frozen. Then Grant's men reached for their guns. Cale was faster. 2 shots. Both men down. Neither dead but bleeding and screaming. Grant shoved Lila aside and drew his own gun. She hit the stairs hard, pain exploding through her shoulder. The next gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Grant stumbled backward, blood spreading across his chest. He looked down at the wound, then up at Kyle, his expression one of complete shock. "You shot me," he said, like he couldn't believe it. "You shouldn't have touched her." Grant fell, hit the floor hard, didn't move. Cale lowered the gun, his hand shaking. Then he looked at Lila, still sitting on the stairs, and something in his expression broke. "We have to go," he said. "Right now." She couldn't move, couldn't process what had just happened. Grant was dead. Grant was dead and Cale had killed him, and this was real. This was happening. This was— "Lila!" Cale grabbed her arm, pulled her to her feet. "We have to go before someone gets the sheriff." That broke through her shock. She ran back upstairs, grabbed her bag, and followed Kyle out the back door into the night. His horse was waiting in the alley. He helped her up, then climbed up behind her, biting back a groan of pain from his wound. They rode hard out of Red Hollow, into the darkness beyond. Behind them, she could hear shouting. Someone had found the bodies. Someone was raising the alarm. But they were already gone, swallowed by the night, racing toward a future that was uncertain and dangerous and completely unknown. Lila pressed back against Cale's chest, felt his heart pounding, felt his arms around her, keeping her steady in the saddle. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt alive. They rode for hours before finally stopping in a small canyon, the horse exhausted. Cale slid down first, then helped Lila dismount. His bandage was soaked with fresh blood. "You're hurt," she said. "We're both hurt." He touched her swollen face gently. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't get there sooner." "You got there." She started unwrapping his bandage. "That's what matters." They sat together in the darkness, tending each other's wounds, not speaking. There was too much to say and no words big enough to hold it all. Finally, Kael said, "I killed him. Yes. I've never killed anyone before. I know. I did it for you." She looked at him, this man who'd turned his whole life upside down for a woman he barely knew. "I know that too. Was it worth it? All this?" She thought about Red Hollow, about Grant, about the life she'd left behind. Then she thought about sitting here in the darkness, free for the first time in years, with a man who saw her as something worth saving. "Ask me again in a year," she said. He laughed, tired and pained and real. Fair enough. They rested there until dawn, then rode on, north, always north, putting distance between themselves and the consequences of what they'd done. Behind them, Red Hollow burned with news of Grant Caldwell's murder. Ahead of them, the future waited, uncertain and dangerous and theirs to shape. And between them, something fragile and new and precious was beginning to grow, something that might become love, if they survived long enough to let it. They rode for 3 days straight, stopping only when the horse couldn't go another step, or when Kael's wound reopened and he needed Lila to restitch it with shaking hands in whatever shelter they could find. Towns were too dangerous. Word would spread fast about Grant Caldwell's murder, and a man and woman traveling together would be remembered. So they stuck to the wild places, the forgotten trails, the spaces between civilization where people didn't ask questions because there was no one around to ask. On the 4th day, they traded Kael's horse for 2 smaller ones, and supplies in a settlement so remote it didn't have a name. The man who made the trade didn't care who they were or where they were going. He just counted Kael's money, nodded, and went back to his business. "We need to talk about where we're headed," Kael said that night. They'd made camp in a grove of cottonwoods near a creek, the first real rest they'd allowed themselves. Lila was cleaning their tin plates with sand and creek water. "I thought we were just running." "We are, but running needs a destination eventually. Do you have one?" He was quiet for a moment, staring into the small fire they'd risked building. "I have a place, up in the mountains, about 2 weeks north of here. Used to be a trapper's cabin. No one's lived there in years, far as I know." "You've been there before?" "Once, long time ago." She waited, hoping he'd say more about his past, about what had brought him to Red Hollow in the first place. But he didn't, and she didn't push. They'd both left things behind that didn't need examining yet. "What's it like?" she asked instead. "Remote? Cold in winter. But there's game, water, shelter. We could make it work." "For how long?" "As long as we need to." She set down the plates and came to sit beside him. Her face still ached where Grant had hit her, a constant reminder of what they'd escaped. "You think they're still looking?" "Yeah, Silas Caldwell doesn't strike me as the forgiving type. He'll want revenge. He'll want more than that. He'll want a message, a demonstration of what happens when someone crosses him." Lila pulled her knees to her chest. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I walked in with my eyes open. You didn't know it would end with you killing someone." He turned to look at her, firelight playing across his face, making the shadows deeper. "No, but I knew it might. And I did it anyway." "Why?" "You really have to ask?" Her throat tightened. "I need to hear it." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her bruised cheek with a gentleness that made her eyes sting. "Because the thought of him owning you, hurting you, breaking you down piece by piece until there was nothing left, I couldn't live with that. I'd rather be dead or running for the rest of my life than know I left you there." "That's insane." "Probably." His thumb traced along her jaw. "But there it is." She leaned into his touch, let herself feel it without pushing it away. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Any of it. Running, hiding, being with someone because I want to, not because I have to." "Neither do I," he admitted. "We'll figure it out as we go." That night she slept curled against his side, his arm around her, their breath synchronized in the darkness. It wasn't passion or romance or any of the things she'd read about in the few books that had passed through Red Hollow. It was something simpler and more profound, 2 people choosing to trust each other when trust was the most dangerous thing they could offer. The landscape changed as they traveled north. The flat, punishing desert gave way to rolling hills, then to pine forests that smelled like rain and earth. The air got cooler, the sun less brutal. Lila found herself breathing deeper, like her lungs had been waiting for air that didn't burn. They passed through a small logging town on the 8th day, just long enough to buy more supplies. Kyle kept his hat low and did the talking while Lila waited with the horses, but she caught fragments of conversation from people on the street. Heard about that shooting down south. Caldwell's boy, they say. Woman with him ran off together. Her heart hammered. The news had traveled faster than they had. She caught Kyle's eye when he came back with their supplies, and he gave a tiny shake of his head. Not here. Not now. They rode hard out of town, didn't stop until they were miles into the forest. They know, Lila said when they finally dismounted. Yeah. What do we do? Keep moving, get to the cabin, disappear for a while. He checked his rifle, made sure it was loaded. If we're lucky, they'll assume we kept running east. Most people do. And if we're not lucky, then we deal with it when it comes. But luck, Lila was learning, was a fickle thing. On the 10th day, they saw riders in the distance. 4 of them, moving with purpose, checking the trails. They were too far away to identify, but Kyle didn't take chances. Off the trail, he said quietly. Now. They led their horses into thick brush, waited in silence while the riders passed. Lila's hand shook where she gripped the reins. One of the horses whickered softly, and she pressed her palm over its nose, praying it would stay quiet. The riders stopped less than 50 yards away. Lila could hear their voices carried on the wind. Tracks went cold near the logging town. Could have doubled back. Silas wants them found, doesn't care how long it takes. What's he planning to do when we catch them? You really want to know? Rough laughter. Then they moved on, and the voices faded. Kyle and Lila stayed hidden for another hour before daring to move. When they finally got back on the trail, neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. They both knew what had almost happened. That night, Kyle kept watch while Lila tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Every sound was a threat. Every shadow a rider. She finally gave up and sat beside him. You should rest, he said. Can't. We're safe for now. Are we? Those men were close, Kyle. Really close. He didn't argue because there was no point. Another 4 days to the cabin. Maybe 3 if we push hard. And then what? We hide up there forever? Just until things cool down. Things like this don't cool down. You killed Silas Caldwell's son. He's not going to forget. He's not going to stop. So what do you want to do? Go back? Turn ourselves in? No, She stopped, frustrated. I don't know. I just hate running. Hate looking over my shoulder every second. I know. He took her hand. But it's better than the alternative. Is it? Sometimes I wonder if we just traded one kind of prison for another. His grip tightened. You think I'm your prison? No. But fear is. Not knowing is. This constant waiting for something terrible to happen. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I can leave. Right now. You could tell them I forced you, that you didn't have a choice. Silas might believe it, might let you go back. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? She turned to face him fully. I chose this. Chose you. I'm not taking it back just because it's hard. Even if it gets you killed? Even then. He pulled her close, pressed his forehead against hers. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I can't give you better than this. You gave me a choice. That's better than anything I had before. They held each other in the darkness, and Lila felt the fear recede just slightly. Not gone. It would never be fully gone. But manageable. Survivable. The next 3 days were brutal. They pushed the horses hard, barely stopping except to let them drink. Kyle's wound had mostly healed, but Lila could see him favoring it. The pain lines around his eyes. Her own bruises had faded to yellow and green, still tender but less obvious. They spoke little, just focused on moving, on distance, on the promise of shelter ahead. On the 13th day, the weather changed. The sky went dark and heavy, pregnant with storm. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and something else, something electric and dangerous. "We need to find cover," Kael said, scanning the darkening sky. "How far to the cabin?" "Too far, maybe 8 hours." The first drops of rain hit like bullets. Within minutes, it was a downpour, soaking them through, turning the trail to mud. Lightning split the sky, thunder following so close it felt like the world was cracking open. Kael pulled his horse close to Lila's. "We have to get off the high ground." She nodded, water streaming down her face, making it hard to see. They guided the horses down a slope toward what looked like a ravine. The animals were panicking, eyes rolling white, fighting the rains. Then the wind hit. Not just wind, a wall of force that nearly knocked them from their saddles. Lila's horse screamed and reared. She held on, but barely, her hand slipping on the wet leather. "Lila!" Kael reached for her, but his own horse was fighting him. The world became chaos. Rain so thick she couldn't see, wind that tore at her clothes, lightning that turned everything white and sharp. She felt herself sliding, felt the saddle shift, felt gravity pulling wrong. Then she was falling. She hit the ground hard, air knocked from her lungs. Above her, her horse bolted into the storm, disappearing into the gray. She tried to get up, couldn't. Something was wrong with her leg, pain shooting up from her ankle. "Kael!" she screamed, but the wind ate her voice. Then he was there, kneeling beside her, rain streaming down his face. "Can you walk?" "My ankle." He didn't wait for more, just scooped her up, grunting with the effort, his wound probably screaming. His horse had stayed, trained better, or just less panicked. He got her into the saddle somehow, then climbed up behind her. "Hold on," he said into her ear. They rode through the storm, Kael's arms around her keeping her in the saddle, the horse picking its way through terrain that kept trying to kill them. Lila faded in and out, pain and cold making everything distant and strange. She came back to awareness when the horse stopped. Kael was climbing down, pulling her after him. They were at the base of a cliff, some kind of overhang providing minimal shelter. He set her down carefully, then went back for his saddlebags. The rain was still pouring, but the overhang caught most of it. Lila leaned back against the rock, shivering violently. "Let me see your ankle," Kael said. She bit back a cry when he touched it. Even through the boot, she could feel it was swollen. "Might be broken," he said. "Can't tell for sure until we get the boot off." "Don't. It'll swell worse." He nodded, moved to start a fire with wood that was somehow dry in his pack. His hands shook from cold and exhaustion. It took him 3 tries to get the flint to catch. When the fire finally flickered to life, they both moved closer to it like moths to flame. Kael wrapped a blanket around Lila's shoulders, then sat beside her. "Your horse?" she asked through chattering teeth. "Gone. We're down to 1. I'm sorry." "Not your fault. Storm came out of nowhere." They sat in silence, listening to the rain, watching the fire. Lila's ankle throbbed in time with her heartbeat. She felt dizzy, sick, scared in a way that was different from the fear of being chased. "How far to the cabin now?" she asked. "On 1 horse? With your ankle?" 2 days. Maybe 3. Can we make it?" He looked at her and she saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke. "I don't know." The storm raged all night. They took turns sleeping, one always awake to keep the fire going and watch for threats. Lila slept fitfully when she slept at all, her ankle a constant ache, fever starting to build from the cold and wet and stress. When dawn came, gray and grim, the rain had stopped but the sky remained dark. Kael checked their supplies while Lila tried to stand. Her ankle wouldn't hold her weight. "We can't stay here," Kael said. "Need to keep moving." "I can't ride." "You don't have to. I'll hold you." "Kael, your wound is fine. We're going." He got her onto the horse with difficulty, then climbed up behind her. The animal was tired, overworked, and carrying double, but it moved when Kael asked. They made slow progress through mud and debris from the storm. Trees down across the trail, rocks that had been stable now loose and dangerous. Everything was harder, slower, more treacherous. Around noon, Lila's fever spiked. She started shaking so hard she couldn't hold on to the saddle horn. Kael had to wrap his arms around her to keep her upright. "Stay with me," he said into her ear. "Just Stay with me. But the world was getting fuzzy at the edges, hot and cold at the same time. She heard herself talking, but didn't know what she was saying. Should have stayed. Sorry. Don't want to die. You're not going to die, Kael said, and she wanted to believe him, but her body felt like it was coming apart. They stopped at what might have been midday, might have been later. Time had stopped meaning anything. Kael got her down from the horse, laid her on the driest ground he could find. He checked her ankle, definitely broken now, the swelling obvious even through the boot. I need to set it, he said. Okay. It's going to hurt. Everything hurts. He cut the boot off carefully. Her ankle was purple and swollen to twice its normal size. When he touched it, checking the break, she screamed, I'm sorry, he kept saying, but he didn't stop. He had to straighten it, had to set it, had to give it a chance to heal right. When it was done, Lila was sobbing, barely conscious. Kyle splinted it with branches and strips of cloth, then wrapped her in every blanket they had. We have to keep going, he said, but he sounded uncertain. Leave me. The words came out slurred. You can move faster alone. Shut up. Kyle, I said shut up. I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever. You understand? She tried to nod, but everything was spinning. He got her back on the horse somehow, held her like she was made of glass. The horse walked on, step by painful step, through terrain that got rougher as they climbed into the mountains. Night fell. Kale didn't stop. Just kept riding, kept holding her, kept murmuring things she couldn't quite hear but felt in her chest anyway. Dawn came again. Or maybe it was the same dawn. Lila couldn't tell anymore. Everything was fever dreams and pain. She saw Grant's face, saw Mary crying, saw her father's grave in Red Hollow, saw Kael's eyes when he'd asked her to run. Almost there. Was that real? Or just another dream? Hold on. She was trying. She was trying so hard. Then the horse stopped. Kael dismounted, pulled her down carefully. She forced her eyes open and saw it. A cabin. Small, weathered, barely standing, but shelter, real shelter. Kael carried her inside. It was dark and dusty and smelled like abandonment, but there was a fireplace and a rough bed frame and walls that would keep the wind out. He laid her on the bed, started a fire with the last of his dry wood. Then he was beside her, checking her ankle again, her forehead, talking to her in that low voice that had become her anchor. You're going to be okay, he said. You keep saying that. Because it's true. How do you know? Because I won't let it be anything else. She tried to smile, but her face wouldn't cooperate. Stubborn. Yeah. So are you. That's why we're going to make it. The fever broke sometime in the night. Lila woke up soaked in sweat, shivering, but clear-headed for the first time in days. The fire was burning low. Kael was asleep beside her, sitting up against the wall, his rifle across his lap. She watched him in the dim light. This man who'd turned his life upside down for her, who'd killed for her, who'd carried her through a storm and refused to leave her even when it would have been smarter. As if sensing her attention, his eyes opened. For a second he looked disoriented, then he focused on her face. Hey, he said softly. Hey. How do you feel? Like I got trampled by a horse and put back together wrong. He almost smiled. That's pretty accurate. She tried to sit up, winced. Her ankle was immobilized in the splint, but it still throbbed. How long have we been here? 2 days. You've been in and out mostly. 2 days? Kyle, the riders haven't found us. Storm probably washed out our trail, and we're far enough north now that they might have given up looking in this direction. Might have? It's the best we've got. She looked around the cabin in the growing light. One room, maybe 12 by 15 feet. The bed frame they were on. The fireplace. A rough table and 2 chairs. A few shelves. Nothing else. This is it? This is the place you were talking about? Yeah. It's not much. No, but it's ours. For now. Ours. The words settled into her chest, warm and strange. She'd never had an ours before. Never had anything that belonged to her and someone else in equal measure. What do we do now? She asked. You heal. I fix this place up a little. Hunt. gather supplies before winter. We survive. And after that, we figure out the next thing. And the thing after that. One day at a time. It wasn't a grand plan. Wasn't a promise of happily ever after. But it was real and honest and more than she'd ever expected to have. Kael? Yeah? She reached for his hand, laced her fingers through his. Thank you for not leaving me in that storm. His grip tightened. Thank you for not dying. Wasn't really up to me. Yes, it was. You could have given up. You didn't. She thought about that, about the moments in the fever when it would have been easier to just stop fighting. But something had kept her tethered, some stubborn refusal to let the world win. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was just him. His voice in the darkness saying, stay with me, his arms keeping her safe, his presence making survival seem like something worth fighting for. I love you, she said. The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. But once they were out, she knew they were true. Not the gentle, easy love of stories. Something rawer and more complicated. Born of desperation and choice and the strange alchemy that happens when two broken people decide to be broken together. He stared at her, and she saw 100 emotions cross his face. Fear, joy, disbelief. Finally, he leaned forward, pressed his forehead to hers like he had that night in the grove, and whispered, I love you too, even though I shouldn't, even though it's crazy, I do. It is crazy. Yeah. We barely know each other. I know. We might die up here, or Silas might find us, or 100 other things might go wrong. They might. She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. But we're doing this anyway? Yeah, we are. And there in that broken-down cabin in the middle of nowhere, with her ankle shattered and their future uncertain and death possibly waiting just over the next hill, Lila Hart kissed Kael Vance. It wasn't graceful or perfect. It was desperate and real and tasted like survival. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kael touched her face with shaking hands. We're gonna make it, he said. Promise? Promise. Outside, the storm clouds were finally breaking. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the cabin walls, painting everything in stripes of gold. Somewhere in the forest, a bird called. The horse whickered softly, alive and safe. And in that moment, despite everything, Lila believed him. Believed they might actually survive this. Believed that choosing each other, choosing freedom, choosing life on their own terms might actually be enough. It wouldn't be easy. The winter would be hard. Her ankle would take months to heal properly. Silas was still out there, still hunting. The world hadn't stopped being dangerous just because they'd found each other. But they were alive. They were together. And they were free. Everything else, they'd figure out as they went. The first week in the cabin taught them both how little they actually knew about survival. Kael could hunt and track, could start a fire and read the weather, but living in one place was different from passing through. Lila could cook when she had ingredients, could mend and clean, but her broken ankle made even simple tasks nearly impossible. They learned to work around each other's limitations. Kael would bring her things, water from the creek, wood for the fire, whatever small game he managed to catch. Lila would prepare what she could from her position on the bed, directing him through the steps of cooking that weren't just throwing meat over flame. You have to sear it first, she said on the third day, watching him poke uncertainly at a rabbit he'd skinned. I am searing it. That's burning. Searing is different. How? Hotter pan? Less time. You're making it tough. He looked at the meat, then at her. You want to do this? I can't walk, remember? Right. He adjusted the pan, tried again. This time it came out better, though still not what either of them would call good. They ate in silence, sitting on the bed together, sharing the one tin plate they had. The rabbit was gamey and overcooked, but it was food, and food meant staying alive another day. We need more supplies, Kael said after they finished. What we have won't last more than another week. The nearest town? 2 days' ride, maybe 3 with the trails in the condition they're in. Lila's stomach tightened. You can't go. What if someone recognizes you? I'll be careful. Careful doesn't matter if Silas has men looking. You said yourself the news spread fast. So what do you suggest? We starve up here? She didn't have an answer for that. They both knew their options were limited. Stay and run out of supplies or risk going into town and possibly getting caught. How much money do we have left? She asked. Cale pulled out the small pouch he'd been carrying, counted the coins onto the blanket. Enough for basic supplies, maybe a little extra. No weapons? Ammunition? We have the rifle and about 20 rounds. Should be enough for hunting if I'm smart about it. Should be. Everything was should be, might be, maybe. Nothing certain, nothing guaranteed. I don't like you going alone, Lila said quietly. I don't like leaving you alone either, but I don't see another choice. She looked at her splinted ankle, useless and throbbing, hated how dependent she'd become, how vulnerable. When? Tomorrow. I'll leave at first light, be back by the third day. And if you're not? He met her eyes. Then you take the horse and whatever supplies are left and you go north. Keep going until you hit the trading post near the border. Don't wait for me. Kyle, I mean it. If I'm not back in 3 days, something went wrong. And if something went wrong, you can't help me. You can only save yourself. The thought of being left alone in this cabin, waiting, not knowing, it made her chest tight. But she nodded because what else could she do? That night they lay together on the narrow bed, neither sleeping much. Lila listened to Kyle breathe, memorized the rhythm of it, the warmth of his body beside hers, tried not to think about what 3 days alone would feel like. Tell me something about your past, she said into the darkness. He shifted slightly. Like what? Anything. Where you're from, what made you start running? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, I had a brother. Younger by 2 years. His name was Daniel. Had. Past tense. Lila waited. We worked a ranch down in Texas. Not our ranch. We were just hands. But it was steady work, decent pay. We were saving up to buy our own place someday. His voice was flat, emotionless in that way that meant the emotions were too big to let out. There was a drought, bad one. The ranchers started losing cattle, losing money, got desperate, started accusing the hands of stealing. Were they? Some, maybe. We weren't. But the rancher's son, he had it in for Daniel. Some argument over a girl, I think. Doesn't matter now. He told his father Daniel was the one stealing. Had evidence, he said. Fabricated all of it. Lila's hand found his in the darkness. They hanged him, Kyle said simply. No trial. No chance to defend himself. Just strung him up from the barn and left him there. Oh, Kyle, I tried to stop them. Got beat down for my trouble. When I came to, Daniel was dead and the rancher was telling everyone it was justice, that thieves got what they deserved. What did you do? Buried my brother. Then I waited 3 days. On the third night, I burned that barn to the ground with everything in it. The rancher's son was inside doing inventory. He didn't make it out. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. He'd been running ever since. Running from justice, from revenge, from a past that wouldn't let him go. I'm sorry, Lila whispered. Me too. But that's why I can't... He stopped, collected himself. That's why when I saw you trapped in Red Hollow, saw Grant treating you like property, I couldn't walk away. Because I've seen what men like that do. How they destroy people just because they can. And I was tired of watching it happen. She pulled closer to him, pressed her face against his shoulder. You're a good man. No, a good man would have found another way. Would have done things legal, proper. I just keep making the same mistakes. Saving people isn't a mistake. Killing them is. She didn't have an argument for that. He'd killed Grant, killed the rancher's son, both times to protect someone, to stop something worse, but killing was still killing. The weight of it didn't disappear just because the reasons were good. Do you regret it? She asked. Any of it? Daniel, yes. Every day. The rancher's son? He paused. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. But Grant? No, I'd do it again tomorrow if it meant keeping you safe. The certainty in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in years. Thank you, she said, for telling me. You deserve to know who you're running with. A good man who made hard choices. That's who I'm running with. He kissed the top of her head. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long. She tried. But sleep was elusive, and when it finally came, it brought dreams of hangings and fire and Kael riding away and never coming back. Dawn came too soon. Kael was up before the sun, gathering what little supplies he'd need for the journey. Lila watched from the bed, trying to memorize every detail, the way he moved, the set of his shoulders, the concentration on his face as he checked the rifle. There's wood stacked by the door, he said without looking at her. Enough for 3 days if you're careful. Water barrel's full. Don't go outside unless you absolutely have to. I know. If anyone comes, I'll hide. You already told me. He finally turned to face her, crossed the small space, and knelt beside the bed. 3 days. I'll be back in 3 days. You better be. He kissed her then, soft and desperate, and full of all the things they didn't know how to say. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with worry. I love you, he said. I love you too. Now go before I change my mind about letting you. He stood, grabbed his pack, and walked out without looking back. Lila listened to the sound of the horse's hooves fading into the forest, then the silence that rushed in to fill the space. She'd been alone before, had spent plenty of nights by herself in that room above the saloon. But this was different. This was isolation. No sounds of the town below, no Mary to talk to, just her and the cabin and the endless forest pressing in from all sides. The first day passed slowly. Lila kept the fire going, rationed the water, tried to keep her mind occupied. She found some old books on one of the shelves, cheap novels someone had left behind, pages yellowed and brittle. She read them without really processing the words, just grateful for something to do. Her ankle ached constantly. She unwrapped the splint once to check it, immediately regretted the decision. The swelling had gone down slightly, but the bruising was spectacular, purple and green and yellow, all the way up to her knee. She wrapped it again carefully, trying to remember how Kael had done it. Night fell. The darkness was absolute in a way it never was in town. No streetlights, no windows glowing, no ambient light from anywhere, just black pressing against the windows, making the small fire seem even smaller. Every sound made her jump. Wind in the trees. Something scurrying in the walls. An owl calling. Her mind turned each noise into threats. Riders approaching. Silas's men surrounding the cabin. Wild animals smelling her helplessness. She slept with the rifle beside her, though she barely knew how to use it. Kael had shown her once, quick and rushed, before he left. Load, aim, pull the trigger. Simple in theory, probably impossible if she actually needed it. The second day was worse. The isolation pressed down heavier. She found herself talking out loud just to hear a voice, even if it was only her own. He'll be back, she told the empty cabin. He promised. 3 days. He'll be back. But doubt crept in. What if something had happened in town? What if he'd been recognized, arrested, hanged like his brother? What if he'd decided this was too hard, that she was too much trouble, and just kept riding? No. She pushed that thought away. Kael wouldn't do that. He'd proven over and over that he kept his promises. Still, the doubt lingered. She tried to do small tasks to pass the time, organized the meager supplies, swept the floor with a broken broom she found, attempted to stand and put weight on her ankle, immediately regretted it when pain shot up her leg like fire. The third day dawned gray and cold. Lila woke before sunrise, had been waking every few hours all night. Her body was tense, waiting, listening for hoofbeats. Morning passed, then noon, then afternoon. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, and still no sign of Kael. She told herself he'd said 3 days, not 2, not early on the third, 3 full days. There was still time, but as the light faded and darkness crept back in, fear took hold. Something was wrong. He should be back by now. Should have been back hours ago. She tried to plan. If he didn't return by morning, what would she do? Could she even get on a horse with her ankle? Could she ride north like he'd said, find those trading posts, survive on her own? The answer to all of those questions felt like no. Night fell. Lila sat by the fire, rifle across her lap, staring at the door. Every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like a year. Then, Sometime around midnight, she heard it. Hoofbeats. Approaching fast. She stood awkwardly, balancing on her good leg, raised the rifle toward the door. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold it. The door burst open. Lila's fingers started to squeeze the trigger. "Don't shoot!" Cale's voice gasping, urgent. She lowered the rifle as he stumbled inside, slamming the door behind him. He looked terrible, covered in trail dust, exhausted, favoring his left arm. "You're hurt," she said. "I'm alive. That's what matters." He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms despite her trying to check his injuries. She felt him shaking. What happened? Town was crawling with Caldwell's men. I saw them before they saw me, got out fast, but they spotted me on the trail back. Had to lose them in the dark. Did you? Think so. Came the long way around, doubled back twice. But Lila... He pulled back to look at her. They know we're in this area. They're searching every trail, every cabin. It's only a matter of time. Her stomach dropped. How long? Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. Then we have to leave. You can't ride yet. Your ankle? Doesn't matter. If they find us here, we're dead anyway. He knew she was right. She could see it in his eyes. I got supplies. Enough for maybe 2 weeks if we stretch it. But that's it. After that, he didn't finish. Didn't need to. Did you get any news about Red Hollow? His expression darkened. Silas put a bounty on us. $500. Dead or alive. $500? A fortune to most people. Enough that every bounty hunter, every desperate man, every person looking for a way out would be searching. We should have kept running, Lila said. Should have never stopped here. You were dying. We didn't have a choice. We always have a choice. Yeah? Well, I chose saving your life over keeping us safe, and I'd do it again. They stared at each other, the fight draining out as quickly as it had come. What was the point? The decision was made. They were here. Silas was hunting them, and they had to figure out what came next. I need to check your arm, Lila said finally. It's fine. Let me see. He sighed, but let her examine it. Deep gash across his forearm, probably from a tree branch while riding in the dark. She cleaned it with their dwindling water supply, wrapped it with cloth torn from one of her spare shirts. You're going to get yourself killed trying to keep me alive, she said softly. Probably. That's not funny. Wasn't trying to be. He touched her face gently. I told you once I'd rather be dead or running than know I left you trapped. I meant it. Even if running kills us both? Even then, she leaned into his touch, let herself feel the warmth of him, the solidity. 3 days alone had taught her something important. Being with him, even facing death, was better than being without him facing nothing. We need a plan, she said. I know, but tonight, can we just... He trailed off, looking exhausted. Rest. Yeah, tonight we rest. They fell asleep tangled together on the narrow bed, both too tired for words. But in the morning, they'd have to face reality. Have to figure out how to run when one of them couldn't walk. Have to decide if there was anywhere left to go. Lila woke first. Dawn light was filtering through the cracks in the cabin walls, painting everything pale gray. Cale was still asleep beside her, his breathing deep and even. She watched him for a moment. This man who'd upended his life for her, and felt something shift in her chest. She loved him. That was clear now. But love wasn't enough. Love didn't stop bullets or heal broken ankles or make $500 bounties disappear. She carefully extracted herself from his arms, tested her ankle. Still couldn't put weight on it, but the pain was less sharp than before. Healing slowly. Maybe in another few weeks she could walk. But they didn't have weeks. Kyle woke while she was trying to figure out how to make coffee one-legged. Let me, he said, taking over. They drank it in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Lila said, We can't stay here. No. And I can't ride yet. No. So what do we do? He stared into his coffee like it held answers. There's a settlement, about 4 days north of here. Small place, just a trading post and a few families. They don't ask questions, don't care much about the outside world. We could hole up there maybe, find work, blend in. For how long? As long as it takes for things to cool down. Things like this don't cool down, Kael. You said so yourself. So what do you want me to say? That we're probably going to get caught? That this is all pointless? Because I can't... His voice broke. I can't think like that. I have to believe there's a way through this. She reached across the small table, took his hand. There is. We just have to find it. Over the next few days, they prepared to leave. Kael hunted, brought back enough meat to smoke and preserve. Lila worked on strengthening her ankle, forcing herself to stand for longer periods despite the pain. They packed what little they had, planned their route, talked through contingencies. On the fourth night, Kael was outside tending to the horse when Lila heard it. Voices. Distant, but getting closer. Her blood went cold. She grabbed the rifle, moved to the window as quietly as she could. Through the trees, she saw lights, torches, multiple people moving through the forest. Kael, she hissed when he came back inside. Someone's coming. He heard it too then, the voices, the lights. He moved fast, grabbing their packs, dousing the fire. Can you ride? He asked. I'll have to. They made it outside just as the first shout went up. Someone had spotted the cabin. Kael got Lila onto the horse, climbed up behind her, and kicked the animal into motion. Shots rang out. Lila ducked instinctively. Kael hunched over her, protecting her with his body, urging the horse faster. They crashed through the underbrush. No trail, just desperate flight through the dark forest. Behind them, more shouts. More shots. The sounds of pursuit. The horse stumbled, caught itself, kept running. Lila held on with everything she had, her ankle screaming with every impact. Kael's arms were iron around her, keeping her in the saddle. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably only one. Finally, the sounds of pursuit faded. Kael slowed the horse, let it catch its breath. You okay? He asked. Yeah. You? Think so. They'd lost most of their supplies in the flight, just had what was in their saddlebags and the clothes on their backs, but they were alive. For now. That settlement you mentioned, Lila said. How far? 3 days if we push hard. Then we push hard. They rode through the night, not daring to stop. By dawn, they were both exhausted, the horse half dead on its feet. They found a cave barely more than an overhang and collapsed. I'm sorry, Kael said. I'm so sorry. I thought we'd have more time. Stop apologizing. We're still breathing. That's more than we had any right to expect. He pulled her close. I'm going to get us through this. I know. But as she drifted into uneasy sleep, Lila wondered if belief was enough, if wanting something badly enough could make it true. If two people running from impossible odds could ever really find peace, she didn't have answers. None that made sense. All she had was the man beside her, the determination to survive, and a small, stubborn hope that somewhere in this vast world there was a place for people like them. A place where the past didn't matter, where bounties couldn't reach, where they could just be. She had to believe that place existed, because without that belief there was nothing left but running until they couldn't run anymore. And she wasn't ready to stop, not yet, not while there was still breath in her body and fight in her heart. So she slept, and she dreamed of destinations she'd never seen, and when she woke, she'd keep running. Because that's what you did when you had no other choice. You ran, and you hoped, and you loved the person running beside you with everything you had. That would have to be enough. They never made it to the settlement. On the second day of hard riding, the horse went lame, stepped wrong on loose rock, and came up favoring its front left leg. Kael examined it in grim silence while Lila watched from where she sat against a tree, her own ankle throbbing in sympathy. Can it walk? She asked, though she already knew the answer from his expression. Not far, not carrying double. So we're stuck. We rest here tonight, see how it looks in the morning. But his voice held no conviction. They both knew what a lame horse meant this far from anywhere. They made camp in a small clearing surrounded by dense pine. No fire. Too risky with Caldwell's men still searching. They shared the last of their jerky and some wild berries Kael had gathered, neither eating enough to be satisfied. Tell me about the settlement, Lila said as darkness fell. What's it like? Kael was quiet for a moment, leaning back against his saddle. I've only been there once, 5, maybe 6 years ago. Just a handful of buildings around a trading post. People living off the land mostly. They trade furs, sometimes gold if they find it, keep to themselves. Think they'd take us in? If we had something to offer, but without a horse. He trailed off. The implication hung heavy between them. Without a horse, they had nothing. No way to hunt effectively, no way to haul goods to trade, no way to run if they needed to. Lila pulled her knees to her chest, careful of her ankle. We could stay here, build something, live off the land like you said. With winter coming in a month, we'd freeze to death before New Year. So what are you saying? He turned to look at her, and in the dim light she could see the exhaustion written into every line of his face. I'm saying I don't know. For the first time since we left Red Hollow, I don't have a plan. The admission should have terrified her. Instead, it made her love him more. He wasn't pretending anymore, wasn't trying to be strong enough for both of them, just being honest about how lost they were. Then we figure it out together, she said. How? I don't know yet, but we will. He reached for her hand in the darkness, laced their fingers together. I keep thinking about that night in the saloon. If I just walked away, just kept my mouth shut when Marcus grabbed you, none of this would have happened. I'd still be trapped. Grant would have forced me to marry him. I'd be dying slowly instead of… She stopped. Instead of whatever this is. This is running until we can't run anymore. No, this is choosing. Every day we wake up and choose each other. That's not nothing, KL. Even if it kills us? Even then. They slept fitfully, taking turns keeping watch. Every sound made them both tense, hands moving to weapons, hearts racing, but nothing came. Just the wind in the trees and the small sounds of the forest living its life around them. Morning brought no improvement to the horse's condition. If anything, the leg looked worse, swollen, hot to the touch. Kyle worked on it for an hour, trying everything he knew, but the animal couldn't put weight on it without flinching. We have to leave it, he said finally. Lila felt her chest tighten. The horse had carried them through the storm, had saved their lives more than once. Leaving it felt like betrayal. We can't just abandon it. We can set it loose. Maybe it'll heal on its own, find its way to the settlement. Or maybe it'll starve, or get eaten by wolves. I know. His voice was rough. But I can't carry you and lead a lame horse through the mountains. We barely have supplies for ourselves. She knew he was right, hated it, but knew it. They couldn't save everything. Sometimes you had to choose what you could carry and leave the rest behind. Kyle removed the saddle and bridle, set them aside. The horse stood there, confused, waiting for direction. He ran his hand along its neck one last time, then stepped back. Go on, he said quietly. Get. The horse didn't move at first. Then, slowly, it limped away into the trees, disappearing into the forest like it had never existed. They divided what they could carry. Lila took the lighter pack despite her protests. Kyle took everything else, the saddlebags, the rifle, what little food remained. He fashioned a walking stick for her from a fallen branch, tested it to make sure it would hold her weight. How far can you walk? He asked. She tried a few steps. Her ankle screamed but held. Far enough. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. They started walking north, following game trails and creek beds, moving slow. Lila's ankle limited them to maybe a mile an hour, and they had to stop frequently for her to rest. Kyle never complained, never pushed, just waited patiently each time she needed to sit. By midday, they'd covered maybe 4 miles. At this rate, the settlement was weeks away, not days. They both knew it, but neither said it. We should find water, Kyle said, studying the landscape. Set up somewhere near a creek. Wait for your ankle to heal more before we push on. That could take weeks. Better than you collapsing on the trail. They found a stream an hour later, followed it to where it pooled beneath a small waterfall. There was a cave nearby, shallow but dry, protected from wind. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Kyle got Lila settled, then went to scout the area. He was gone for over an hour. When he came back, his expression was carefully neutral. What is it? She asked. Found tracks. 3 horses, maybe 4, heading east. Her stomach dropped. How old? Day, maybe 2. So they're ahead of us now. Or they doubled back. No way to know. She closed her eyes, fought down the panic trying to claw its way up her throat. They were trapped between pursuers behind them and unknown riders ahead. Every direction was dangerous. We could hide here, she said. Just wait them out. For how long? Week? Month? Winter? If that's what it takes. He sat down beside her heavily. Lila, we have maybe 3 days of food left. No horse to hunt from. No way to cover enough ground to find game. Hiding here is just slow starvation. So what do you suggest? I don't know. That's the problem. Every choice is bad. They sat in silence, the sound of the waterfall filling the space between them. Lila thought about Red Hollow, about Mary, about the simple certainty of waking up each day, knowing exactly what she had to do to survive. She'd hated that life, but at least it had been clear. This freedom they'd run toward was turning out to be just another kind of prison. Tell me the truth, she said quietly. Do you think we're going to make it? Kael was quiet for a long time. Then, I think we're going to try, and I think that has to be enough. Is it? For you? He looked at her, and she saw all the fear and doubt he'd been hiding. You are enough. Whatever happens, having this, having you, it's more than I ever thought I'd have. So yeah, it's enough. She kissed him then, soft and desperate, trying to pour everything she felt into that contact. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I'm scared, she whispered against his mouth. Me too. But I'm not sorry. Neither am I. They held each other as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, beautiful and terrible at the same time, like everything else about their situation. That night, Lila's fever came back, not as bad as before, but enough to make her shake and sweat, enough to turn her dreams strange and fractured. She woke multiple times, disoriented, Kael's voice pulling her back to reality. You're okay, he kept saying. I'm here. You're okay. But she wasn't okay. Her body was breaking down, the constant stress and poor nutrition and healing injuries all catching up at once. By morning, she was so weak she couldn't stand without help. Kael tried to hide his worry, but she could see it in every line of his body. He got water from the stream, made her drink even when she didn't want to. Found some plants he thought might help, boiled them into a bitter tea. She choked down. You need real medicine, he said, checking her forehead. A doctor. The settlement is too far. You won't make it. Then what? He stood, paced the small cave, thinking. Finally, he stopped, turned to face her. There's a town, half a day's ride east, maybe a day's walk. East is where those tracks were heading. I know. So it's dangerous. Everything's dangerous, but they'll have a doctor, supplies. Maybe I can steal what we need, get back before… No. She struggled to sit up despite the dizziness. You can't go. If they catch you, if I don't go, you die. That's not a choice I can live with. Kael, we're done arguing about this. His voice was firm but gentle. I'm going. You're staying here. I'll be back by tomorrow night. And if you're not, then you wait one more day. After that, you do what you have to do to survive. She wanted to fight him on it, but she was so tired and he was right. She could feel her body failing, could feel the fever burning through what little strength she had left. Without help, she'd be dead in a week. Promise me you'll come back, she said. I promise. Promise me you won't get yourself killed trying to save me. He knelt beside her, took her face in his hands. Can't promise that. Because saving you is the only thing that matters. He left at first light, after making sure she had water and the rifle within reach. Lila watched him disappear into the trees, then lay back down and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The day passed in a fever haze. She drifted in and out, unable to tell what was real and what was dream. Sometimes she was back in Red Hollow, serving drinks. Sometimes she was on the horse in the storm, Kael's arms around her. Sometimes she was nowhere, just floating in darkness. When she finally surfaced into something like consciousness, it was dark outside and someone was shaking her shoulder. Lila! Lila! Wake up! Not Kael's voice, deeper, rougher. She forced her eyes open. A stranger crouched beside her. Older man, maybe 50, weathered face and kind eyes. Behind him stood a woman about the same age carrying a lantern. Who? Lila tried to sit up, reached for the rifle. Easy, the man said. We're not here to hurt you. Name's Thomas. This is my wife, Sarah. We're from the settlement north of here. How did you find me? Your friend came through our town this afternoon, Sarah said, moving closer with the lantern. Caused quite a stir asking about doctors and medicine. When the sheriff started asking questions, he ran, but not before he told me where to find you. Lila's heart was pounding. Did they catch him? Don't know, Thomas said. He led them east, away from here. Smart thinking, but that means he might not be coming back anytime soon. I have to find him. She tried to stand, immediately fell back. You're not finding anyone in this condition, Sarah said firmly. First we get you well, then we figure out the rest. I don't have money to pay. We're not asking for money. Sarah started unpacking supplies from a bag she'd brought. Real medicine, fresh bandages, food. Your friend told me what happened. About the man you were running from. About why. You don't understand. There's a bounty. I understand that a woman trapped in a bad situation made a hard choice, Sarah interrupted. And I understand that sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing. Thomas helped Lila drink some water while Sarah examined her ankle. This needs proper care. We've got a cabin about 2 hours' walk from here. You'll stay with us until you're healed. I can't. If they find me, they'll find you. Let us worry about that, Thomas said. They half carried her through the forest, Sarah supporting one side, Thomas the other. Lila was too weak to protest, too sick to do anything but let them help. The cabin appeared out of the darkness like something from a dream, small but solid, smoke rising from the chimney, warm light glowing in the windows. Sarah got her inside, into a real bed with real blankets, and Lila almost wept from the simple comfort of it. Over the next 3 days, Sarah nursed her back from the edge. Real food, real medicine, rest. Slowly, the fever broke. The infection in her ankle started to heal. Lila's strength returned in increments, small victories measured in being able to sit up, then stand, then walk a few steps. But every moment of recovery was shadowed by worry about Kyle. Where was he? Had he been caught? Was he alive? He's smart, Sarah assured her. If he made it this long running from Caldwell's men, he can make it a while longer. You don't know that. No, but I know men like him, survivors. He'll find his way back. On the 4th day, Lila was strong enough to walk outside. The cabin sat in a small valley, surrounded by mountains, isolated and peaceful. Thomas explained that they were trappers, living up here most of the year, only going to town when they needed supplies. No one comes up here, he said. You're safe for now. I can't stay forever. No, but you can stay until you're healed and until we know what happened to your friend. That evening, as Lila was helping Sarah prepare dinner, they heard a horse approaching. Thomas grabbed his rifle, motioned for the women to get inside. Through the window, Lila saw a rider emerge from the trees. Her heart stopped. Kale. She was out the door before anyone could stop her, running on her still healing ankle, not caring about the pain. He dismounted before she reached him and caught her when she threw herself into his arms. You're alive, she sobbed into his chest. You're alive! So are you. His arms tightened around her. Sarah said you were bad. I thought, I'm okay now. Because of them. She pulled back to look at his face. He had a new bruise on his jaw, a cut above his eye, but he was whole, alive. Here. What happened? Led them on a chase east for 2 days, finally lost them in some canyon country, doubled back through the night. He looked past her to where Thomas and Sarah were standing. Thank you for taking care of her. She told us what happened, Sarah said, about Red Hollow, about Caldwell's son. Cale tensed. And nothing. What's done is done. Question is what happens now. They went inside. Over dinner, Cale explained what he'd learned in town. Silas Caldwell had increased the bounty to $750, had men searching in every direction. But the trail had gone cold after the storm, and most people thought they'd either died in the mountains or made it to the border. So he might give up? Lila asked. Silas Caldwell doesn't give up, Thomas said. But he might move his attention elsewhere. Eventually. How long is eventually? Months, maybe years. Men like that, They hold grudges to the grave. The weight of that settled over the table. Years of running, years of looking over their shoulders, years of never being safe. There might be another option, Sarah said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Winter's coming. In another few weeks, the passes will close. Nothing gets in or out of these mountains until spring. So we stay here? Kale asked. You could. We've got enough supplies for 4 if we're careful. Come spring, Caldwell might have moved on, or at least lost interest enough that you could slip away easier. It was more than they dared hope for. 6 months of safety. 6 months to heal, to rest, to be something other than hunted. Why would you do this? Lila asked. Risk yourself for strangers? Sarah and Thomas exchanged a look. Then Sarah said, We had a daughter once, about your age. She got mixed up with a bad man, tried to leave, ended up dead for her trouble. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. Maybe we can't save her, but maybe we can save you. Lila felt tears spill down her cheeks. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Just live. Make the choice she couldn't. That night, Lila and Kyle lay together in the small room Sarah had prepared for them. A real room, with a real bed, walls that didn't leak, and a door that locked. This doesn't feel real, Lila whispered. I know. What if it's a trap? What if... It's not. He pulled her closer. For once, let's just accept that someone's being kind. That we might actually be safe. She wanted to believe it, wanted to let herself relax into the possibility of safety. But fear had become such a constant companion that letting it go felt impossible. I keep waiting for something terrible to happen, she admitted. Me too. But maybe we've had our terrible things. Maybe this is the part where we get to breathe. Over the next weeks, they settled into a rhythm. Kale helped Thomas with trapping and hunting. Lila worked with Sarah on preserving food for winter, mending clothes, all the small tasks that made survival possible. Her ankle healed enough that she could walk without pain, though it would always be weak. They didn't talk much about the future, just focused on each day as it came. Surviving, living, learning what it meant to exist without constant fear. The first snow came in late October. By November, the passes were impassable, the valley cut off from the world. The 4 of them settled in for the long winter, sharing meals and stories and the quiet comfort of not being alone. On Christmas Eve, Sarah made a special dinner with the last of their stored vegetables and a rabbit Thomas had caught. They sat around the table, and for the first time in months, Lila felt something like peace. What are you thinking? Kyle asked her later, as they lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside. That I'm happy. Is that allowed? Why wouldn't it be? Because everything we have is built on death and running and choices that destroyed other people's lives. Or it's built on survival, on choosing life over surrender, on finding each other in the middle of impossible circumstances. She rolled over to face him. Do you really believe that? I'm trying to. Because the alternative is spending the rest of our lives drowning in guilt, and I don't want that for us. What do you want? He thought about it. A life. A real one. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. Where we wake up each day and choose each other and build something that matters. Here? Maybe. Or somewhere else. Doesn't matter where as long as we're together. She kissed him, soft and slow, letting herself feel the future in that touch. A future that was possible now. Uncertain, yes. Dangerous, probably. But possible. Winter passed slowly. The days were short and cold, but inside the cabin there was warmth and companionship. Thomas taught Kyle about trapping, about reading the forest. Sarah taught Lila about plants, about healing, about survival in ways that went beyond just staying alive. In February, on a particularly bitter night, Sarah pulled Lila aside while the men were outside checking traps. You're pregnant, she said simply. Lila's world tilted. What? I've had 4 children. I know the signs, the way you've been tired, sick in the mornings. When was your last bleeding? Lila thought back, tried to remember. It had been before they left the first cabin. Maybe 2 months ago? Longer? I can't be pregnant, she said, though even as she spoke, she knew it was true. Knew it in the way her body felt different. the way her breasts were tender, the way she'd been crying at nothing. "Does Kyle know?" "No, I didn't. I didn't know." Sarah took her hand. "This changes things." "I know. You two need to talk. Figure out what you want to do." That night, after dinner, Lila pulled Kale outside. The stars were brilliant in the cold air, the world silent under its blanket of snow. "I need to tell you something," she said. He tensed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, just—" She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "You're sure?" he finally asked. "Sarah says yes, and I think she's right. I can feel it." "How far?" "Maybe 2 months? Maybe 3? He did the math. Conceived in the cabin, probably, during those first days of fever and fear and desperate hope. A child born of impossible circumstances, wanted or not. "What do you want to do?" he asked carefully. "I don't know. We didn't plan. That's not what I asked." She looked up at the stars, tried to find words for the complicated mess of feelings inside her. Fear, yes. Uncertainty, definitely. But also something else, something that felt almost like joy. "I want to keep it," she said quietly. "I want to have this baby and raise it somewhere safe and give it all the choices I never had. Even if that means staying here, building a life in these mountains." Even then. He pulled her into his arms, held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Then that's what we'll do." "You're not angry?" "Angry? I'm terrified. I have no idea how to be a father. But angry? No. This is—" He pulled back to look at her face. "This is a future, something real and solid and ours. How could I be angry about that?" They told Thomas and Sarah the next morning. Both were overjoyed, already making plans for a nursery, for supplies they'd need, for how to prepare. "You'll stay then?" Thomas asked. "After winter?" Kyle looked at Lila. She nodded. "We'll stay," he said, "if you'll have us." "This valley's big enough for all of us," Sarah said. "And a baby, well, that's new life, something to build toward." Spring came slowly. The snow melted, revealing the brown earth beneath. The passes opened, and with them, the possibility of discovery. Kale and Thomas rode to the settlement in early April, cautious and watchful. They came back with supplies and news. Silas Caldwell was dead, had died in January, heart attack in his sleep. Grant's funeral had been sparsely attended. The mine was up for sale. Red Hollow was dying, people leaving faster than new ones arrived. The bounty was officially withdrawn. There was no one left to pay it. Lila cried when Kyle told her. Not from relief, though there was that, but from the strange grief of an ending. Grant was dead, Silas was dead, Red Hollow was fading into memory. All those people who'd shaped her life through their cruelty and control were gone, and she was still here. "It's over," Kyle said, holding her. "Really over." "Is it? Or is this just another pause before the next terrible thing?" "Maybe both, but we'll face it together." Their daughter was born in August during a thunderstorm that reminded Lila of the night she'd almost died. Sarah helped deliver her while Kale paced outside, useless and anxious. When he finally came in and saw Lila holding their baby, his face broke into something Lila had never seen before. Pure, unguarded joy. "She's perfect," he whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand. "She's ours," Lila corrected. "That's better than perfect." They named her Hope, not because their story had been hopeful, it hadn't, but because she represented the future they were choosing to believe in. The possibility that something good could come from all the pain and running and fear. Years passed. They built a real cabin near Thomas and Sarah's, expanded it as needed. Kyle became a skilled trapper and hunter. Lila learned to preserve food, to heal with plants, to teach Hope about the world in ways that honored truth over comfort. They rarely talked about Red Hollow, about Grant or Silas or the life they'd left behind. That belonged to different people. The girl who'd worked at the Dusty Rose, the drifter passing through. Those versions of themselves were gone, replaced by a woman who'd chosen freedom and a man who'd chosen love. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Lila would stand outside their cabin and look at the mountains surrounding their valley, the same mountains that had almost killed them, that had hidden them, that had become home. And she'd think about Mary, wonder if she was still alive, still working at that saloon, about Tom the blacksmith, about all the people trapped in dying towns, serving dying dreams, never knowing there was another option. She couldn't save them, could barely save herself, but she could live, could raise her daughter to know that freedom existed even if it cost everything to claim it. Hope grew strong and wild, learning to track with her father, to heal with her mother. At 5 years old, she could name every plant in the valley and tell you which ones were safe to eat. At 7, she could handle a rifle and skin a rabbit. But she also knew kindness, learned from watching Thomas and Sarah, from seeing the way her parents treated each other with gentleness, even when things were hard. She knew that strength wasn't the same as hardness, that surviving didn't mean shutting down. One evening, when Hope was 8, she asked the question they'd been waiting for. "Mama, why do you and Papa sometimes look sad when you think no one's watching?" Lila and Cale exchanged glances. They'd agreed long ago to tell her the truth when she was old enough to understand. "Because we made hard choices," Lila said carefully. "Choices that hurt people. And even when those choices were necessary, they still carry weight." "What kind of choices?" "The kind where every option was bad, but we chose the one that let us survive, let us be together, let us have you." Hope thought about that, serious beyond her years. "Do you regret it?" "No," Cale said. "We regret what we had to do, but not where it led us." "That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't," Lila agreed. "But that's how it is. Life doesn't make sense sometimes. You just do your best and hope it's enough." Hope accepted that the way she accepted most things, with quiet contemplation and eventual understanding. She didn't need to know all the details yet. Someday when she was older, they'd tell her about Red Hollow and Grant and the storm and everything else. But for now, this was enough. Thomas died when Hope was 10, peacefully in his sleep. Sarah followed 6 months later, as if she'd just been waiting to make sure everything was settled before joining him. They buried them both on a hill overlooking the valley, marked with simple wooden crosses. "They saved us," Lila said at Sarah's grave. "Gave us this life." "We gave them something too," Kyle said. "A second chance to save someone. That mattered to them." Hope stood between them, holding both their hands, learning about grief and gratitude at the same time. The years continued. Hope turned 12, then 15, then 18. More settlers came to the valley, drawn by rumors of good hunting and clean water. The settlement grew into a small town. Not like Red Hollow, this place had no mines, no single family controlling everything, just people helping each other survive. Cale served as sheriff for a while, his past unknown to the newcomers. Lila worked as a healer, using everything Sarah had taught her. They built a life that was ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. On Hope's 20th birthday, she announced she was leaving. "Not forever," she assured them, "just to see what's out there, to know the world beyond these mountains." Lila's first instinct was panic. The world was dangerous. The world had tried to kill them both. But she looked at her daughter, strong and smart and brave, and realized that keeping her trapped here would just be another kind of Red Hollow. "Be careful," was all she said. "And come back when you're ready." "I will." Hope hugged them both. "You gave me roots. Now I need to find my wings." She left on a spring morning, riding the same trails her parents had once fled down. But she was riding toward something, not away from it. That made all the difference. After she was gone, Lila and Kyle stood outside their cabin, hands linked, watching the empty trail. "She'll be okay," Kyle said. "I know, doesn't make it easier." "No, but nothing worth having is easy. You taught me that." Lila looked at him, this man who'd killed for her, run with her, built a life alongside her. Gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes, but still the same person who'd stood up for a saloon girl when he didn't have to. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just walked away that day?" she asked. "If you'd let Marcus grab me and finished your meal and left town?" "Every single day." And I'm grateful I didn't, because this, you, Hope, this life, it's more than I ever thought I'd have. More than I deserved. You deserve it. We both do. They went inside as the sun set, into the home they'd built from nothing. It wasn't perfect. They still had nightmares sometimes, still jumped at sudden sounds, still carried the weight of what they'd done. But they had each other. Had a daughter who knew freedom, had a life that was theirs by choice, not circumstance. That night, lying in bed, Lila thought about the girl she'd been. 23 and trapped, and certain the world had nothing better to offer. She wished she could go back and tell that girl what was coming. The pain, yes, but also the beauty. The fear, yes, but also the love. The running, yes, but also the arriving. "What are you thinking?" Kael asked in the darkness. "That we made it." "Yeah, we did. Against all odds. Against everything." She rolled over to face him, found his hand in the dark. "I love you. Still. Always. I love you too. Even more than I did that first day. Even though I broke your life, you didn't break it. You made it worth living." Outside, the wind moved through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and possibility. Somewhere out there, Hope was beginning her own story. Somewhere further south, Red Hollow was dust and memory. And here, in this cabin, in these mountains, two people who'd chosen each other against all reason were choosing each other still. It wasn't the happy ending from stories. It was better. It was real. And real was enough. Real was everything. Real was home.